I thought I was doing everything I could to help the planet. But then, with one friend's post, everything changed. The post sent me to a report online published by the United Nations stating that cows produce more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector. This means that raising cattle produces more greenhouse gases than all cars, trucks, trains, boats, planes combined, 13% compared to 18% for livestock. This is because cows produce a substantial amount of methane from their digestive process. Methane gas from livestock is 25 to 100 times more destructive than carbon dioxide from vehicles. Here I'd been riding my bike everywhere to help reduce emissions, but it turns out there's more to climate change than just fossil fuels. I started doing more research. The UN, along with other agencies, reported that not only did livestock play a major role in global warming, it is also the leading cause of resource consumption and environmental degradation destroying the planet today. How is it possible I wasn't aware of this? I thought this information would be plastered everywhere in the environmental community. I went to the nation's largest environmental organizations' websites, 350.org, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, Climate Reality, Rainforest Action Network, Amazon Watch, and was shocked to see they had virtually nothing on animal agriculture. What was going on? Why would they not have this information on there? It seemed the main focus for many of these groups was natural gas and oil production, with fracking being the latest hot issue due to water usage and contamination. Hydraulic fracturing for natural gas uses an incredible amount of water. A staggering 100 billion gallons of water is used every year in the United States. But when I compared this with animal agriculture, raising livestock just in the US consumes 34 trillion gallons of water. And it turns out the methane emissions from both industries are nearly equal. Living in California, a state plagued by drought and water shortages, water use is a major concern for many of us.
The average Californian uses about 1,500 gallons per person per day. About half of that is related to the consumption of meat and dairy products. And so all of the water embedded in the grain and that the animal eats essentially is considered part of the virtual water footprint of that product.
I found out that 1/4 pound hamburger requires over 660 gallons of water to produce. Here I've been taking these short showers trying to save water, and to find out just eating one hamburger is the equivalent of showering 2 entire months. So much attention is given to lowering our home water use, yet domestic water use is only 5% of what is consumed in the US versus 55% for animal agriculture. That's because it takes upwards of 2,500 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. I went on the government's Department of Water Resources' Save Our Water campaign, where it outlines behavior changes to help conserve our water, like using low-flow shower heads, efficient toilets, water-saving appliances, and fix leaky faucets and sprinkler heads, but nothing. Clearly, the government did not want to talk about this issue. Their inability to answer, along with the environmental organization's silence on the topic of animal agriculture, made it seem something more was going on. I started doing more investigating on the impacts of livestock and found out this situation was actually worse than I had thought. In 2009, 2 advisors from the World Bank released an analysis on human-induced greenhouse gases, finding that animal agriculture was responsible not for 18%, as the UN stated, but was actually 51% of all greenhouse gases. 51%. Yet all we hear about is burning fossil fuels. This devastating figure is due to clear-cutting rainforests for grazing, respiration, and all the waste animals produce. This makes animal agriculture the #1 contributor to human-caused climate change. But not only that, I found out raising animals for food consumes 1/3 of all the planet's fresh water, occupies up to 45% of the Earth's land, is responsible for up to 91% of Amazon destruction, is a leading cause of species extinction, ocean dead zones, and habitat destruction. Yet, the world's largest environmental groups that are supposed to be saving our world didn't mention this anywhere. I had to speak with environmental organizations to find out why they weren't addressing this issue. I sent off dozens of emails, made call after call, spent hours on hold. Days became weeks and weeks became months, and for some reason, no one wanted to talk to me about this. So bizarre. I supported these organizations for so long and now was met with silence. I was, however, able to connect with a handful of environmental authors and advocates that were willing to address this issue.
So my calculations are that without using any gas or oil or fuel ever again from this day forward, that we would still exceed our maximum carbon equivalent greenhouse gas emissions, the 565 gigatons, by the year 2030, without the electricity sector even, or energy sector even factored in the equation, all simply by raising and eating livestock.
Free-living animals made up, 10,000 years ago, made up 99% of the biomass. And human beings, we only made up 1% of the biomass. Today, only 10,000 years later, which is really just a fraction of time, we human beings and the animals that we own as property make up 98% of the biomass. And wild, free-living animals make up only 2%. We've basically completely stolen the world, the earth, from free-living animals to use for ourselves and our cows and pigs and chickens and factory farmed fish. And the oceans have been even more devastated.
91% of the loss of rainforest in the Amazon area thus far to date, 91% that's been destroyed is due to raising livestock.
The leading cause of environmental destruction is animal agriculture.
I just couldn't understand why the world's largest environmental organizations were not addressing this when their entire mission is to help protect the environment.
They do not want to address the primary driving cause of environmental devastation, which is animal agriculture, because they're businesses and they want to make sure that they have a reliable source of funding.
If you listen to the majority of the major environmental organizations, they're not telling you to do much besides live your life the way you've been living it, but change your light bulb from time to time, drive less, use less plastic, recycle more. It's better for their fundraising and better for their profile to create a victim and
That was it. No more emails, no more phone calls. I had enough. I realized if I wanted answers, I would have to go to these organizations' headquarters in person. Hi, how's it going? We're doing a full-length feature documentary, and it's on sustainability and animal agriculture plays a role. And we're seeing if we can talk to David Barr.
David Barr?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an appointment with him?
We've been trying for like almost 2 months, and we haven't even had one receptive email or anything. So seeing if we can just set something up.
Let me just get
They sent out their PR person instead. She refused to be filmed and told us to turn off the camera, but promised someone from their rainforest, ocean, and climate change departments would all speak with us, finally. Next stop was to give Sierra Club a visit. With the climate change, what's the leading cause of that?
Well, it's basically burning too many fossil fuels. So coal, natural gas, oil, tar sands, oil shale, all these new exotic fuels that are kind of hybrids between them. But that's basically what is loading up the atmosphere. So we have this greenhouse effect where the heat is getting trapped and the temperatures are soaring at a rate that has never existed in the history of the Earth.
And what about livestock and animal agriculture?
Well, what about it? I mean,
we do just research. A couple of the UN report says it's more livestock accounts for more than all transportation put together. A recent 2009 World Watch report, livestock causes 51% of all greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, well, it is a big issue, and we need to address that as well. But, there's just so many different potential sources of methane and carbon emissions.
If the number one leading cause is animal agriculture and meat consumption, then doesn't that need to be the number one focus, if not the number two?
Well, that's your assessment. Our assessment is different.
That was bizarre. So Greenpeace got back with me today and said, "It was great to meet with you yesterday. I've spoken with various people here at Greenpeace about your request, but I'm afraid we're not going to be able to help this time." Our global rainforests are essentially the planet's lungs. They breathe in CO2 and exhale oxygen. An acre of rainforest is cleared every second, and the leading cause is to graze animals and grow their feed crops. That is essentially an entire football field cleared every single second. And it is estimated that every day, close to 100 plant, animal, and insect species are lost due to rainforest destruction. I immediately went to Amazon Watch to see if they would say what the leading cause of rainforest destruction truly is.
The most biologically and culturally diverse place on the planet is under massive attack right now. The Amazon rainforest itself could be gone in the matter of the next 10 years.
What is the leading cause of rainforest destruction?
The leading cause of rainforest destruction, I would say, well, just to put it into the context of what Amazon Watch works on, you know, there's many drivers of deforestation, as we call them, many different reasons and ways that the rainforests are destroyed. The ones that cause the most damage and are the most widespread are mega projects, such as oil and gas pipelines, such as mining projects, such as mega dam projects. We're not talking about...
I felt like I was going in circles with all these groups, as if I were stuck in some strange Cowspiracy twilight zone where no one could talk about cows. I couldn't believe these organizations just wouldn't say what the leading cause of rainforest destruction truly is. I had to ask one more time.
It's hard to say what is the leading cause of deforestation of the Amazon because they're all destructive: oil and gas, mining, dams, agriculture. But in terms of land use, in terms of the amount of land that is destroyed by unfortunately, one of the biggest causes of deforestation, definitely in the Brazilian Amazon, is agribusiness, cattle grazing and soy production in particular.
This is really what's going on. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that's, like, no Greenpeace or no one's really saying the whole story?
The whole story about the main cause of deforestation.
Yeah.
And I think you brought up some really good points about why isn't anybody doing anything about this? And I think in Brazil in particular, I think when we look at, you know, what happened after the Forest Code was passed, and people who were standing up against the lobbyists and the interests, the special interests, the cattle industry, the agribusiness industry, what was happening to them? A lot of people who were speaking out got killed. And if you look at, you know, say Carlos, you look at Claudio, there's people who are putting themselves out there and saying, you know, cattle ranching, you know, is destroying the Amazon. You know, a lot of those people who are really putting themselves out there, and look at Dorothy Stang, you know, the nun who lived out in Pará, who was killed. A lot of people will speak up. A lot of people just keep their mouths shut because they don't want to be the next one with the bullet to their head.
Sister Dorothy Stang was a U.S.-born nun living in the heart of the Brazilian rainforest. Her life's work was to protect the Amazon. She spoke out openly against the destruction of rainforests from cattle ranching for years. Walking home one night, she was brutally gunned down at point-blank range by a hired gun from the cattle industry.
The animal agriculture industry is one of the most powerful industries on the planet. Most people would be shocked to learn that animal rights and environmental activists are the #1 domestic terrorism threat, according to the FBI.
Do you realize that 75% of Americans consider themselves to be environmentalists? You don't think we couldn't solve this problem in a heartbeat? I'll tell you what, all we would need is for the environmentalists to live what they profess, and we'd be on a new course in the world.